Back in 2015, Aquarius Game Studio released Horizon Chase World Tour exclusively for Android and iOS. It was an old-school racing game featuring the titular World Tour, in which you had a series of races taking place all over the globe. The game was a love letter to the 2D racing games of old, inspired by titles such as Outrun, Lotus, and especially Top Gear, not that one, on the SNES. The technology to simulate an entire race with fully dynamic AI opponents just wasn't there yet. So instead you started in last place and had to overcome your opponents before crossing the finish line, or before the time limit ran out. The graphics also used 2D sprite scaling to create the illusion of depth. In 2018 came Horizon Chase Turbo, an enhanced port released for multiple systems, with more cars, more races, and more gameplay modes. And that's the main dish of this video. As you might have guessed, there's no story here, just races. The main mode is the previously mentioned World Tour, taking you all over the world to compete in a bunch of races. Beating them earns you coins, and once you earn enough, you unlock the next set of races. Simple stuff, right? Racing itself is just as simple, taking place in short looping tracks. You start at the back, and your job is to be the first to finish your laps. Like its inspirations, Horizon doesn't have regular steering like your typical racing game. Turns are instead taken automatically. What you have to worry about is dodging obstacles and circumventing your opponents, who will happily try to cockblock your passage. And this is one of those games where you can just slam the accelerator all the way through. Sometimes you have to let go for a brief moment so that you don't crash into the sides of the road, but otherwise it's flat out all the way. Brakes are for losers. Perfectly timing your engine at the start triggers a small speed boost, and you also start with 3 nitros that can be triggered at any time for another boost. More can be picked up in some stages as well as fuel cans, because that's a thing. World Tour races have a number of extra coins to pick up, and if you manage to collect all of them and finish in first place, you earn a super trophy. Any unused fuel also gets turned into coins. You only have a handful of cars at the start, but more are unlocked by earning coins, or by clearing certain milestones, and each car has its own stats. There are no licenses here, but many cars are obvious analogs to existing ones. You have references to other racing games, you have bootleg Lamborghinis and Ferraris, and you even have one that really makes you want to listen to Eurobeat. And without licensing deals, there's no danger of it going the way of the Outrun 2006. Now let's be clear here, Horizon Chase isn't a simulator. It's as far from one as it can be, so don't expect one car to drive completely differently from one another. But it does just enough to stop different cars from feeling like different skins, rather than different machines. Maybe one accelerates faster but has lower top speed, or has slower steering. Or maybe it's just all around super fast, but eats fuel like popcorn, and if you're not careful you might not even finish the race. You also have some unlockable upgrade races, which have no coins to collect, but grant you a permanent upgrade for all your cars if you can finish it in at least 3rd place. Turbo adds a few new game modes. One is Tournament Mode, which has 3 classes with multiple tournaments, each featuring a selection of 4 races from World Tour. Each participant gains points based on their placement in each race, and the one with the most points wins the tournament. You still have nitro and fuel, but upgrades are predetermined on each tournament, and instead of regular coins, you have nitro coins, which automatically trigger a free nitro when you collect all of them. Next is Playground, where the cursed scent of the life surface comes in. Thankfully, you don't need another account or anything external, it's tied to your Steam account. And you don't need to be connected to the internet to play, only to upload your times to the leaderboards. Anyway, every few weeks there's a new event featuring some new races with their own limitations, tweaks and rules. These are completely optional and don't really award you anything outside of the occasional skin, but it's an excuse to boot the game up every once in a while. Of course, it requires you to play the game all the time, so you don't miss anything. The event races are quite short, but it's kind of frustrating to have missed content just because you weren't playing the game. This isn't a problem specific to this game, but yeah. Finally, there's Endurance Mode, which randomly selects a number of races from World Tour and forces you to go through all of them in a row. You earn points like in Tournament Mode, but falling below 5th place ends your run. The Nitro coins are also present here, and upgrades are awarded as you progress. It's all simple arcadey stuff, but the way it modernizes the concept raises Horizon Chase to the top of its class. As much nostalgia as I have for Lotus 2, it really doesn't hold up very well in this day and age. I didn't grow up with Top Gear, not that one, but it's very clear where the inspiration comes from. It has the nitro boosts, the fuel meter, and even the little speech bubbles are there. Hell, a couple of the music tracks in Horizon are literally remixes of tracks from the original Top Gear, not that one. Regardless, Horizon doesn't have the technological limitations of its predecessors. It's a game that invokes memories of a distant time, but it invokes only the good and none of the bad. Of course, it doesn't actually use the same kind of graphics. It simply uses fully 3D models and environments aligned in a way to imitate sprite scaling. And it's what I would call aesthetic as balls. It's clean, it's colorful, and despite the tracks not having much variety in terms of layout, given its style of gameplay, it still avoids being repetitive by having 12 different countries with 12 different visual styles, and each track with its own personality. Some races even change their weather conditions midway through, and I especially like the races that take place at night, where you get the city lights and street lamps contrasting with the dark tones. Although the visual design likely also came from the limitations of the hardware that the developers were working with. While phones have evolved tremendously from the old breaks of yester's century, their capabilities still can't match the average gaming PC or console. But it looks cool and fits the game, so who cares? The soundtrack is an equally fitting mix of electronic and chiptunes, and it's what comes to mind when I think about what those old racers sound like. Which makes a lot of sense, because it was composed by Barry Leach, who also worked on the Top Gear Not Those Ones and Lotus games. The game also has that pick up and play appeal due to how short the races are. Even the longest ones barely cross 3 minutes, so it comes with the added bonus of not leaving you frustrated if you screw yourself over, because you only lose like 2 or 3 minutes of your time. You don't have to finish in first place either, since stuff is unlocked through coins rather than rankings, and you can always come back later after you get some more upgrades. You also have online leaderboards where you can select ghost versions of each player's best time, if you want to challenge the best players in the world. Or the cheaters, because of course there's gonna be assholes trying to ruin it for everyone. But that's a small problem in the grand scale of things. If I had to point out the biggest flaw with the game, it would be the car balance, because after a while it starts being kind of clear how the game favors handling over speed. As it turns out, slamming headfirst into an obstacle is a bigger problem than being 5% slower on a straight road. As races get harder, you get more tight curves to deal with, so cars with higher handling stat can take curves and overcome opponents without losing as much speed. And the thing is, these cars with superior handling barely lose out in raw speed, and the difference doesn't change even with all upgrades. They're not 20% or 30% slower, it's more like 10% at most, and the superior steering and the nitro boosts easily make up for that. The Déjà in particular basically has the perfect stat distribution, with very high handling and acceleration, good speed and nitro power, and fuel, well, who even cares about fuel? In practice, it's a non-issue. Races are too short for it to matter, and you'll probably grab a can or two while racing normally, so it really only becomes a problem in a handful of races, mostly early ones. Having 20 cars together at the start also results in a physical kerfuffle, and sometimes you just don't have the space to move through opponents. You can try to sneak through by going off-road for a moment, but that also slows you down. Feels a bit unfair, you know? And while this is typically only a problem for the first 30 minutes or so of each race, remember that races are all extremely short, lasting from as little as 1 minute to 4 minutes at most. But hey, these are still relatively minor problems. You can still beat the game with any car. It's just that some cars will have a better time doing it than others. Anyway, the game also has 3 pieces of DLC as of this video. One is the standalone soundtrack, which is also available on Bandcamp and Spotify. Second is the Rookie series, which is free and includes a new car. It's intended for people new to this kind of game, and in short, it's a cut-down version of World Tour, with half the opponents and no coins or fuel to worry about. You only get a small selection of races, and new stuff is automatically unlocked in a linear order. In all honesty, this probably will only appeal to game journalists and people who have literally never touched a video game in their lives. But hey, I'm glad the option is there for those who want it. More interesting is Summer Vibes, which has a new car and 12 new races. This DLC has Outrun vibes all over it, taking you from coast to coast in locations with tons of sun, beaches and other attractions. You can complete the whole thing in like 30 minutes, and it's still just regular races rather than checkpoints like Outrun, but the new car is fine and the races are fun. It's not essential, but it's also dirt cheap. The base game is also fairly cheap at 17 euro coins, and frequently drops to as low as 5 during sales, so if you're interested but not convinced, you can always get it on the cheapo during a sale. I can't speak for the console versions, but it runs smooth as balls on PC, as you'd expect from any mobile port worth its salt, and it supports high frame rates and ultra-wide resolutions. Any PC from the past decade should be able to handle it decently. Even my old laptop runs it fine. It's clear that Horizon isn't just some mobile shuffleware or just nostalgia bait. It's a game made with heart and love for a style of racing that has largely been forgotten. Not that there aren't other good retro-styled racing games out there, like Slipstream for example. But if I had to pick one to chase the Horizon, it would be this one.